Spider-Man No Way Home was written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, and it's based on the character created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And here's the official synopsis. With Spider-Man's identity now revealed, Peter asks Doctor Strange for help. When a spell goes wrong, dangerous foes from other worlds start to appear, forcing Peter to discover what it truly means to be Spider-Man. Now, within the Spider-Man world, I'd say, and this is probably, well, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion, but I'm a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man guy. I don't know if it's for nostalgic reasons or if it was, again, him being the first one in like this new age of, big Marvel superhero movies, but just that like nerdy underdog Peter Parker character who knocked out the park. And Spider-Man, not so much, but since he's like completely, masked and has a suit from top to bottom, from head to toe, I feel like you're like less reliant on Tobey Maguire himself to portray Spider-Man. Whereas like a Batman who's like half masked or a Superman, you like see the actual actor more. But that said, Tom Holland is an extremely close second, definitely the best since Tobey Maguire, and probably better if I was being objective, but he's so fucking good at the role. And Andrew Garfield, I thought was good as well. I wasn't mad at it, but Tom Holland definitely takes the cake. Oh, and something that I loved in this movie that I actually forgot to mention in my little recap and review of The Batman is something that if you're not a New Yorker, i.e. you don't live in New York, and if you don't have Spectrum cable, and if you don't watch New York 1, this won't mean anything to you. But I loved seeing, and a lot of like superhero movies and movies in general use them, but the New York 1 news anchors within Spider-Man, similar to the Batman. And I've seen them in movies like Bright, the Will Smith movie. You just see them all the time, and it's like dope to see because I watch New York 1 all the time, and it's like, oh shit, look, it's Annika, or look, it's Pat Kiernan, etc., etc. So that's pretty cool to see. Also, speaking of New York, and the fact that Spider-Man is from Queens, shout out to Queens, the best borough. As Spider-Man's school, they use, at least from the outside, like the view of it, they use Franklin K. Lane, which I don't live too far from. And it was actually my zoned high school back in the day, and I thankfully didn't have to go to it because it was like the quote-unquote bad high school. I think it's been like cleaned up and better now, but it got so bad that they had to like break it down into 4 different schools within one. I think like 4 different charters, or not sure exactly how that works, but yeah, it was like the school that as a junior high school kid going into high school, you definitely avoided going to. Definitely had a bad reputation, but it's cool to see. It's like, I think it used to be, legend has it, quote unquote legend, because I don't know how much of it is legend or just bullshit, but I think it used to be like a prison or some sort of asylum way back in the day. So it's like a really big property with a lot of land, and then it was eventually converted into high school. But yeah, that's the shot from above that you see of the school that Peter Parker goes to is Franklin K. Lane. Fun fact. And they did a good job of, I guess, like covering the J train. Like they show the train, but kind of cover the fact that it's like the J train station or whatever. Now, something I'd say about the Marvel multiverse movies, and it's weird because it took Zack Snyder's cut of the DC the Snyder cut of the Justice League for me to be able to conceptualize this, but I couldn't wrap my head around the whole multiverse concept and like the extended Marvel universe. Even with, I know like the Doctor Strange movie like set this up, and even that cartoon Spider-Man movie, the Into the Spider-Verse, which was good, played around with this concept and idea of there being a multiverse, multiple universes. But yeah, it took for some reason, for me, it like hit me like a ton of bricks. For me to like get it and wrap my head around it, it took that Justice League movie for it to make sense to me. And then now I get it. It's basically, you have multiple universes. And again, that's why you can have a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, an Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, a Tom Holland Spider-Man, all these different characters with, one of them has Mary Jane as a girlfriend, one of them has the MJ played by Zendaya, but the MJ stands for something else. And you have like different bad guys and sometimes different characters playing the same bad guy. And it's just like a multiverse. which is ultimately like the concept of there being an infinite number of realities going on simultaneously, to the point that somewhere out there in the universe, there is another version of Tony wearing the exact same shirt that I'm wearing now, recording the exact same podcast that I'm recording now. But in that Tony's universe, instead of it being the Spun Today podcast, it's the Spun Yesterday podcast or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it could be like little changes like that, or that Tony could be black, or that Tony could be single, or he could have 3 kids instead of 2, and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know why I couldn't get it before. Like, I was trying to reconcile the fact, wait, but how does this work? If Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, how could this guy also be Spider-Man? And, you know, it's still the same time period, and but that explains it all, right? And this movie was kind of like the culmination of that concept, because it shows with Doctor Strange's fucked up spell, or when the spell got fucked up, how the different timelines intertwined, which is why we got to see Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. We got to see Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, all coexisting at the same time, which is cool for nostalgic purposes, but made for a really dope movie. And we got to see throwback villains, which were great, like Electro, which was Jamie Foxx's character, the Green Goblin by Willem Dafoe, Dr. Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina. So this movie did a great job of bringing all those worlds together and just underscoring that multiverse fact, underscoring the existence of that multiverse. And I thought that was really cool. And it kind of sucked that in the previous Spider-Mans with Tom Holland, it was kind of cool that his best friend and Aunt May, played by Marissa Tomei, his best friend Ned, played by Jacob Batalon, and his girl MJ, played by Zendaya, like, they all knew who Spider-Man was. But then when everybody found out who he was, it started causing issues for his loved ones. And him, you know, trying to be like the good guy and like making all that right, went to Doctor Strange, as I said in the synopsis, to, you know, cast his spell so that nobody knew who he was again. But then, like, mid-spell, he was like, oh wait, but I still want my girl to know, I still want my best friend to know, I still want May to know, etc., etc. And that, like, fucked everything up and caused the convergence of the multiverse. And ultimately, to make it all right, spoiler alert, he had to be okay with the anonymity again, with creating a spell where nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew who Spider-Man was. Nobody knew even Peter Parker was, essentially. So his girl, his best friend, they ultimately become strangers to him. And it was sad because he kind of like had it all, you know, pre this movie, you know, with those loved ones, like the closest people to him knew that aspect of him. You know, he was able to share that and be open with them, which was dissimilar from, you know, most superheroes and previous iterations of Spider-Man, but in a very butterfly effect-esque kind of way. It's like when he had it all, everybody else in his life was miserable. And in order to make them not miserable, he had to not have it all. And he essentially had to become miserable. Although the selflessness of the Spider-Man character allows him to be okay with that as long as his loved ones are okay. Spider-Man's such a dope character in that way. And one of the movies that I really liked that I feel was underrated, and I actually haven't seen the second one. I think there's a part 2. But the first Venom movie, the Tom Hardy Venom, this whole expanded universe thing now allows for, you know, overlaps there. And in the post-credit scene, shout out to post-credit scenes, there's a scene where the Tom Hardy Venom essentially says that he has to go to where Spider-Man's at and meet Spider-Man. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Spider-Man No Way Home. Check it out.